get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Antoine Sebera. I am the Government Chief Innovation Officer. I'm greatly honored to join you today and be part of this esteemed panel. Today, we plan to discuss with you more on AI. I'm sure you had a good morning and different session that you attended. And this one is going to be diving in more specifically on unleashing the power of AI in agriculture. But first, allow me to introduce all the panelists that have agreed to join us today. From the far right, we have Honorable Samuel Narte George, Minister of Communication and Digitalization from the Republic of Ghana. Please allow me to welcome him. Next to him, we have Mr. Stuart Collins, Senior Program Officer in charge of Digital Solution and Agriculture Development at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Welcome. We also joined by Mr. Amat Patesene, who is the Managing Director for the Africa Food System Forum. Also together with Shalini Unikrishnan, Managing Director and Senior Consultant at the Boston Consulting Group. And last but not least, Madame Eliane Oubalijoro, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the Center for International Forestry Research and World Agroforestry. So, great panel with thought leaders, and we look forward to be discussing some interesting topics. Let me start first by bringing in a bit of context. The population is growing very fast. I think by 2050, the world will be having about 8.2 billion people living in our planet. And roughly 25% will be residing in Africa. We are going to be the fastest growing population in the world. And again, we see more people moving into cities, a growing middle class that is now changing in their diet. This is coming also with additional challenges, especially on the environmental impact on agriculture. Excessive use of water, fertilizers, pesticides, which are causing soil degradation. However, agriculture remains the backbone of our economies, and we see 60% or more of the continent workforce being involved into agriculture. And it's contributing to about 23% of sub-Saharan Africa GDP. This is coming into a very challenging constraint of climate change, whereby food production might reduce by up to 20% by 2050. I would like to start with the first panelist, Madame Eliane Oubalijoro, who can tell us a little bit about how, in this context of climate change, AI-driven climate forecasting and smart irrigation system can help smallholder farmers in adapting to the changes. Mm-hmm. Welcome.
So what's really interesting is that what we know that AI can do, it can enable to going from delayed, reactive to proactive real-time decision-making. So as an example, the AIM for Scale program, co-funded by the Gates Foundation, have scaled simple low-tech weather forecasting and AI innovation through multi-ministry and financial institutional partnerships. We need more similar models scaled across Africa, and that kind of investment. When combined with open and continuously updated data, what we know is that AI can truly support smallholder farmers by going far beyond just weather prediction. And at C4Acraft, we believe that there are three elements that are really critical. Number one, we need to look beyond weather. We need to add soil and land health that are foundational, linked to water availability, linked to soil health. We know that 65% of soils in Africa are degraded. So how we're looking at soil health really is critical to determine the farmer's capacity, not only to increase that 23% of GDP, because we really know that productivity needs to be increased, particularly with population growth on the continent, but also to retain water, absorb nutrients, and withstand climate shocks. Our land degradation surveillance framework integrates ground sampling, remote sensing, and AI modeling to predict soil quality and identify degradation hotspots. And then what we're able to do is paired with climate forecasting. This allows more context-sensitive precision interventions, such as smart irrigation plans rooted in real soil conditions, as well as not just rainfall. But we can also help in terms of our area of expertise, which are trees, ensuring that we have the right trees for the right purposes on those soils to stabilize the soils, allow water retention to happen, and use AI prediction to let you know which are the best trees for that particular area. We also know we cannot underestimate how we bring citizens into the AI loop. Too often, AI tools are built without the people who you actually use them. In our Regreening Africa program, where we've been working already with about 600,000 smallholder farmers, we've seen that citizen-generated data and assisted interpretation play a really powerful role. And also, what we know is that through our mobile platforms, farmers not only contribute data, but also learn to interpret AI-generated insights, leading to informed action on the ground. This shows that AI works when it respects and reinforces local capacity rather than replacing it. We also know that Africa has its own needs. AI models and digital advisories must be tailored to local agroecological and socioeconomic context. And we're also excited about the roadmaps that recognize that and know that we need to also work in local languages. So how do we use neurolinguistic programming to be able to have advisory services work with people in their own languages? And as we work with all of these together, we know that we're able to really help the farmer produce more sustainably in a way that's climate resilient, that also brings more nutritious foods locally, and also ensures that what we're doing is not decreasing local biodiversity.
Thank you very much, Eliane. Indeed, a lot of innovation happening in climate forecasting and already touching 600,000 farmers. I would like to turn to Stuart and try to see what are other AI applications that we have out there that can help the African farmers to grow more food.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe just back on the weather innovations for a moment. You mentioned the Aim for Scale work that we're co-investing with UAE. And we're very excited about that space. I mean, some of the new AI weather models really open up the opportunity to give more agency to local Met departments to run these models. Historically, currently we're dependent on some of the models run by NASA and European Space Agency on a global level. But if you can localize those models, then you can tailor them to local conditions and develop more accurate forecasts, especially around things like planting windows. Now, in terms of how do you then deliver those insights through to farmers, we're very, very excited about AI advisory. ChatGPT sort of took the world by storm. It was the fastest growing digital solution that's ever been launched. And why can't smallholder farmers benefit from this technology? Building out just that vision of, imagine a smallholder farmer speaking to a feature phone in their local language, as was just mentioned, and having a conversation about their farming business, asking questions, but then also connecting into some of the back-end services like a weather forecast or market price information, soil health advice, integrating that solution and delivering all of that through a very affordable channel. So, this is why we're excited about the potential impacts here. Two examples, we've been running some experiments in this space over the last couple of years since ChatGPT launched. We've learned a lot. Initially the latency was terrible, and it was hard to sort of distinguish somebody speaking to the phone with background noise and dealing with the accuracy and hallucinations of these models. But two specific examples that I'd like to highlight. One is called ISDA. They have a virtual agronomist where they're using WhatsApp, and it's a conversational interface for farmers to provide information about their field, about their crop, about their previous seasons, and then calls out to a Bayesian model for a more precise fertilizer rate recommendation. And through that program, we've seen across 11,000 farmers in Uganda about 66% increase in productivity, and similar increases in income. So that's quite amazing when, if you know this space and know that even just a few percentage point increase there is pretty remarkable. Digital Green is another example that many may have heard of, and they have a farmer.chat solution on an Android application, and similar scale. They're both reaching around 200,000 farmers at the moment. They released a paper recently that sort of goes through how do you evaluate these solutions, how do you build benchmarking tools. We think that's super important. But another interesting aspect was the real-time data that you can get back from these systems. So you'll see these visualizations in their paper that sort of show you by month what topic farmers were asking about. And think of that real-time information. You're getting that every day. The extension service can see that if you've got 1 million farmers that are using this system, you see hotspots of certain diseases occurring in real time. That can be useful for the service. It can be useful for input suppliers and off-takers. And then these benefits we think could be really dramatic. So if you think about just be conservative. Let's say we have a 15% increase in productivity or incomes, actually, and then 30% adoption across a geography. When we're talking millions of farmers across multiple countries, we're starting to talk about billions of dollars of additional economic value. And so that's why we feel that it's really worth investing in these farmer-facing tools, but also the foundational models that drive those, the data corpus that represents smallholder farmers. And we think that at a national level, there may be opportunities to do this as a collective approach, as opposed to every agtech innovator building their own LLM. Let's sort of try to come together on a cohesive service or data sharing at that national level, and even beyond. A lot of discussion this morning about regional data protocols and data sharing opportunities.
Thank you very much, Stuart. I see a lot of examples that are already changing lives. And this is a good segue to another topic of discussion here, which is about connectivity. People need to access these tools in a way that is affordable, however, we remain unconnected on the continent. The ITU has released some report and saying more than 2.3 billion people are not connected in the world. And specifically in the rural areas, can go all the way up to 43%. I would like to ask the question to the Honorable Minister Samuel to find out how can governments and work together with the private sector accelerate connectivity and reduce the digital gap, especially for the rural areas, both in terms of connectivity, but also in terms of access to data.
Well, thank you very much, and grateful to be on the panel with the rest of the panelists. I think that where we sit, we really need to just solve the problem of the cost of data and the cost of devices. Many times we hear people talk on the continent about access to data or access to connectivity, bridging the digital divide, and saying that we need to connect more communities. But what people fail to realize is that the more you connect the communities, if the communities don't have the economic might to get onto the internet highway, you may have provided access, but that access is not affordable. Now, when you have over 60% of our workforce in agriculture, and many of this 60% is below what you call your middle class, they are actually living below the poverty line, and they are the ones providing you your food security, you then have a big challenge. For me, I believe that one of the things that governments need to do is to use their universal access funds to drive connectivity. And as minister in Ghana, what I've said to them is, we need to look at internet connectivity in the same way we look at utilities. Because internet connectivity is actually a utility like power and water. In Ghana, we've got about 85% penetration for electricity coverage in the country. And a large part of that was achieved by doing what we call rural electrification. And I said to my Universal Access Fund, which sits under my ministry, the Ghana Investment Fund for Electronic Communication, GIFEC, I said to them that when we do a rural electrification program, it's a self-help program. The community works. They dig they carry the poles. They string the cables together. But once that rural electrification project is completed, it is no longer seen as an intervention. It becomes a commercially viable entity. The power company goes in there with meters and sells them power. There is a whole ecosystem built around power. Someone opens a beer bar. Someone begins to sell refrigerated drink. Someone begins to show Premier League matches. There's a whole ecosystem that is economic. Ghana has pioneered what we call the Rural Star technology, which is a rural telephony platform that carries 2G and 3G connectivity, and it's been replicated across the rest of Africa. However, what I've realized is when we roll out these rural telephony sites, we don't build the ecosystem to commercialize it. And so, yes, you've provided access, but the people in there just see the rural telephony poles and don't actually see the value beyond making the phone calls to their kids in the urban areas. They don't see what those poles with 3G and 4G connectivity could do to them or for them in their agriculture. It doesn't mean anything to the local farmer what precision farming could actually become or do for him. And that's where, as government, we need to begin. And I've said to my team in Ghana, we need to begin to let people realize the commercial value of the access that we're giving to them. And so governments across the continent need to have a conscious effort to making sure that we do the digital literacy for the people we're connecting at a cheap, affordable rate to then be able to build the ecosystem around it and know that, look, the internet is not for the young kids who are just doing TikTok, but for a farmer, it holds great potential for how much yield he's going to have in the season, what the weather patterns are, building a platform where he can actually cut out middlemen and be able to sell directly. All of these are platforms that we can use the power of internet and devices. And so for me, the real thing here is that we must embed AI where it matters most. We must embed AI in the hands of farmers, in their native languages, and on their own phones. That's the only way we can really see the true power of AI in agriculture, where the work that the two panelists who spoke before me speak about, they're able to take the power of AI tools and create, of AI tools and create the interface in the language of the farmer. To be able to use those tools is critical. There's work ongoing in Ghana in that regard where we've built the language models for the farmers to be able to interact with this. And again, one of the key things we realized, the first layer of that project was to do a text. So you type in in your local language, and then we realized that many local people speak the language but cannot read and write it. And that's why it must be voice activated. And so you move to the level, the second iteration of it is now the voice prompt, where the farmer speaks to the app, and the app speaks back in the local language. And I think that this is where governments across Africa must begin to channel our energies and focus on it. It is the only way we can actually guarantee food security on the continent. Because as we continue to talk about our growing population, and you made reference to that, by 2050, 1 in every 4 human beings on the world is going to be African. Are we sure that we're producing enough food for that population growth?
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for this great insight. Yeah, of course, the tools, connectivity, affordability, but we're still facing challenges for post-harvest losses. Suppose we use very well these technologies, we're growing a lot of food, but we stand the risk to lose a lot of them due to supply chain challenges, they are not optimized, predictive market analysis, and logistic automation. I'd like to address my question to Shalini and see how do you think AI can support in optimizing our supply chains?
Yeah, thank you. So obviously, I don't think I need to spend much time telling everyone how important it is for us to address food loss and waste, and the impact it can have, addressing that can have on farmers' livelihoods, on food security, and on climate-related challenges. I think we've talked a lot about some of these examples of technologies on weather and so on that can also have a really meaningful impact on preventing food loss and waste, right? So if a farmer knows when to harvest better, if a farmer is able to, using AI, understand the disease that is starting to spread in one part of his farm and prevent that from spreading, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot that can be done using the power of AI and in empowering the farmer to be able to make decisions that allow them to prevent losses. I want to maybe focus a little bit more on the non-sexy end of it, which is there's actually, there's farmer-facing solutions, and it's been fascinating to see how so many have developed, and you all have given some great examples. But being farmer-centric doesn't always have to be farmer-facing. Other important parts of that ecosystem can be made a lot more efficient and effective by leveraging AI, and that in turn will help farmers. So I'll give an example of some of the work that we've been doing with governments in Africa that have combined multiple technologies, including AI, to help a government understand. So this is more about enabling decision-making within government that have often sat in multiple silos that, when come together, can actually prevent food losses in a much more meaningful way. So for one government, for instance, helping them use the geospatial mapping and pictures, et cetera, to identify where exactly wheat is being grown in small little farms all across the country. Using layers of analytics on that to design what would be the optimal supply chain network and where the warehouses should be placed. Then layering on the financial analytics on top of that that help them understand which of these warehouses actually have a positive return on investment and therefore can be packaged off as investment opportunities for the private sector, and where you don't have great ROI and where public financing should be more directed towards, so we have more efficient use of our public finances. And then linking that to, with the weather technologies, et cetera, linking that to be able to more efficiently and effectively deploy your social safety net support to farmers. So instead of saying this is everything every farmer's getting or so on, actually with more volatility coming from climate change, et cetera, getting much better at being able to more surgically deploy social safety nets to support farmers when they are going to be facing losses due to factors that are outside of their control. Being able to deploy using that your harvesting solution. So, in one place they created a rental model for the harvesting technologies, and we're able to use this to deploy it more efficiently because every farmer was not going to be able to afford buying that capital equipment. So I think, I wanted to maybe give that example, because, there are lots of solutions that can solve these challenges, but wanted to make sure we also think about the entire spectrum of where all we could be deploying these kinds of solutions.
Thank you very much. Speaking about social safety nets and also the way we can finance agriculture, I'd like to turn to Pate and see if we can think of AI-powered risk assessment models or other agritech fintech solution to improve access to credit and reduce the default rate.
No, thank you very much. So I will just look at it from a farmer's perspective. Like long time ago, any society which you look, we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and so on. But when you look at, the ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, all those civilizations, the Sahel here, people used to use data to decide geometry and to decide whether you want to take a loan or whether you want to do an exchange. Because sometimes it was not even money, but it's more like, I have a service, let's exchange. Now, currently into the financial sector, you have many of our countries, when you look at a farm, at the farm level, farmers are seen as risky from the beginning. No, because here it rains, it stops. The rain-fed type of agriculture we have is one thing. Second, you have the issue of land, land tenure, all the reality around it, because also data is missing there, and sometimes you don't have the information that is digitalized and available. So you do have also this perception of interest rate and all those kind of collateral we need for insurance to make sure that it is de-risked. And those information today, if you are an institutional investor, a bank, or anyone who would like to invest, you are looking at how am I going to get back my money, particularly when it's smallholder farming or any other one. And then first of all, you will look at the insurance. Insurance today, if you don't have predictability, then it cannot come because you cannot be paid. So those weather forecasts has to be also integrated into all these insurance companies that have locked today their product because of how the situation is on the ground, because of lack of data or it's sophisticated to get there. It's coming, but we need to leapfrog. The second aspect is if you have to link your loans and grants to a certain de-risking mechanism, obviously those de-risking mechanisms should go beyond the insurance. It goes also with the technical capacity. I give you money, you're able to get return on investment because you have productivity, and then you can pay me back. That return of investment on the know-how, of course, now you can also with AI do like digital training, digital extension services. And most of the training you see many NGOs, development partners, government doing, it's like bring people, pay, and then you have a few number. And I think with AI, you can reach a bigger number because then those digital type of extension services could happen, whether it's on irrigation, whether it's when to sow, pest disease control. All those elements can be put to bring the de-risking of the know-how on it. And then now in the market, if today I'm taking a loan, and then I would like also to have a decision making. So today, I cannot tell you which one is giving at 20% interest rate or because you don't have the information. And this information today may be available because of AI, so you will be able to decide where to go, how you would like to take it because of also the business you are doing, it's cash crop and so on. And it's from the demand and the supply side. So most of those information combined, whether it is in the financial sector, and by the way, you can even integrate the climate aspect, like incentive for people to do climate resilient adaptation mitigation, for them to get that incentive of financing and then be able to work on it. On the other side also, whoever is receiving that loan or access to finance will do whatever that financial sector. So most of these data need to be collected at the country level, like the minister said, Honorable Minister said. So the infrastructure to collect those data, to have it at the local level, like you have banks, remote financial services, those data should be integrated as part of the ecosystem to make sure that today we are also getting, from a social protection perspective, low interest rate that are integrated, longer tenure, and also period of grass that will help you from one cycle of farming to another one. You are able also to get the resources, get productivity and payback, and then it reduces the default and also help to clear that lack of trust that exists between farmers and also the entire value chain system and the financial sector.
Thank you very much. And this is reminding me of some innovative startup here who were able to use satellite imagery and also drone to capture data for crop prediction. But now the question is to de-risk and have these innovative models, as well as what we can collect from smart agriculture. A lot of this data can be collected, but how do we make it accessible to the financial institution, but also the startup to develop additional models? And this is a good segue to come back again to the Honorable Minister to ask about data sovereignty, sometimes a controversial issue. People sometimes think of sovereignty at country level. Some people think also sovereignty at institutional level. Can we think of innovative policies that we can put in place for, of course, protecting data for the farmer, while as well release it for innovators to develop more models to empower the farmers?
Well, I think that the question of data sovereignty is a very interesting one, especially in the light of COVID. and what we saw with vaccine sovereignty, and how you get to realize that we say we're very interconnected, but when crisis strikes, we think about ourselves first. From the country that hosts the African Free Continental Trade Area Secretariat, Ghana, we're all about driving digital trade and driving connectivity across the whole of Africa and making it one trading bloc. And so as a government and as a foreign policy position, Ghana has a very liberal outlook on data sovereignty. We believe that whether you approve it or not, it's going to happen. And so as a policy position, you're better off embracing it and regulating it and deciding that, look, we're going to support cross-border data flows, ensuring that farmers in Nigeria who have a similar weather pattern to farmers in Ghana can have access to data that's been taken from Ghana and use that for private sector innovators to be able to provide solutions that will work for us in the sub-region. It's the same way Rwanda or Kigali and Nairobi may have very similar weather patterns, and it's important for you to be able to leverage on the data sets that you're building individually. And again, I think that this whole issue of data flows comes back to, and forgive me, I'm very Pan-African, but it comes back to our colonial mentality as Africans. Because the real truth is, for example, Ghana and Ivory Coast were divided by a line on the map, were divided by our colonial masters in the language that we speak, but traditionally we're one people. Because you go into, there's a chief who sits in the Ivory Coast. His palace is in the Ivory Coast, but 3/4 of his land that he oversees as chief or king is in Ghana. And we speak the same language across the border. Traditional language, not official language. Official language, English and French, separation. So the question is, why should we be bothered about data flows between Ghana and Ivory Coast when we're the same people? Only divided by colonial border lines drawn on the map. And so I think it comes back to the decolonization of the African mind, to realize that we're actually one people, and that we're only going to be strong when, as one continent, we realize that we need to support each other and build together to rise together. Because when you look at countries that have achieved food security, the United States, for example, China, for example, these are continents which have been made countries. Because you look at the economy of Texas and Philadelphia, completely different. But they've built themselves together under the Commonwealth of the United States and build on the synergies, the strengths of each other. Same happens with China. The parts of China that are very close to Russia and extremely cold and may not be able to support agriculture. And then you've got parts of China that have tropical weather and have come to take cocoa crop scientists from Ghana and are now producing cocoa in China. Building synergies. Meanwhile, the farmer in Ghana thinks that his competition is sitting in Nairobi. And so unless we break down that mindset and begin to decide to work and collaborate together across the African continent, we will never really see the full benefit of AFTA, and you can only get the full benefit of AFTA when there's cross-border data flows. Yes, we may be able to say, and that's why I said, thank you. It looks like there are many Pan-Africans in the room. But I honestly believe that we will get there if we get to that place where we own the idea of sharing data and amongst ourselves decide that we would hold, every country will be able to hold a certain level of sovereign data. But what is required for industry, for innovation, we will share. Because I don't see what is national security as minister in Ghana for me to hold data sets from my colleagues in Togo or Nigeria under the guise of national security, because God spare the thought, hazard the thought, that food insecurity hits any of my neighboring countries, it's going to put pressure on my buffer stocks, because they're going to come into my country to look for food. So better help them with the information I have to deal with their food insecurity than have them coming and deplete my buffer stocks. So I think we need to work together as a continent, and we'll deal with this together.
Can't agree more, and thank you, Honorable Minister, for bringing this Pan-Africanism perspective. And when speaking about synergies, the fact is we use data sets from other regions. Sometimes even our own data, we don't own them. In that same line of thinking, can we think of Pan-African models driven by Africa? And this question will be addressed to you, Leon.
So to follow from the Honorable Minister, what I love about the work we do at C4 ICRAF is that we have bases in 14 African countries across the continent. And so what's really critical is this sharing. How do we share information across regions, across sectors in terms of, we look at green tree commodities, so are we looking at cocoa in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire? How are we learning from tea production in Kenya and Rwanda? So the critical importance of how do we turn that data into gold? And I'm just going to step out of agriculture and think about the Human Genome Project that cost $3.2 billion when it was completed. Every year now, we have revenues from biotech that are in the billions and billions of dollars because that initial investment in a common data set was made. And so what's really critical is how are we working together to build those African data sets? And so what we really see is the need of full data pipeline challenge, from how data is collected to how it's curated, analyzed, and turned into actionable knowledge. And at every stage, the process must be tailored to African landscapes, farmers, and food systems. And imported data sets and models can't replace local understanding. We already have a functioning model. I have already talked about our landscape degradation surveillance framework, and this has generated high-quality geospatial soil and land health data across more than 20 countries. So together with community-driven tools like the Regreening Africa app and species-focused platforms like Tree Grower, we've created regionally grounded data sets that reflect the diversity of Africa and are publicly available, from soils to farming practice to local knowledge systems. And what we also know is we need to focus on the forgotten crops that are central to this. Our recent climate niche modeling that shows that many underutilized African crops, such as amaranth, African eggplant, and tamarind, can thrive in areas where climate change is expected to reduce the viability of the staple crops that, 90% of the crops that we eat are of very few crops. If you think about wheat, potato, rice, very few. So these underutilized species offer a dual opportunity: climate resilience and nutritional value. Yet they remain underrepresented in global data sets. Including them into AI training sets is essential if we want these tools to reflect the true potential of African food systems. We must make sure that these data are shared, structured, and governed responsibly. Through our Global Landscape Forum, Africa AI consultations, stakeholders have emphasized the need of interoperable digital infrastructure. And this includes common standards, open APIs, and trusted governance that allow data from across sectors to flow and inform innovation. And this includes government systems, fintech, cooperative, research institutions, startups working all together. And what we know is that if we put science and citizens in the middle of the loop, what we get is really the ability to have assisted science, citizen science feeding into robust AI models. And this empowers local communities to generate and interpret data, not just consume outputs. And we've seen this improves trust, adoption, and local action. We also know that it's really critical to be able to fill the academic capacity gap. So participants across the Global Landscape Forum dialogues consistently called for training programs that bridge AI, agriculture, ecology, and policy, grounded in local institutions and needs. And this is where a vision behind the Africa AI Hub, where we see is developing a platform with partners across sectors to align standards, develop regionally trained AI models, and really ensure that data reflects African realities, from forgotten crops to degraded lands to farmer-led innovation. And with this rich data commons, our continent and startup communities can really better serve agripreneurs across the value chains while also serving smallholder farmers and local communities. For example, Rwanda has made an impressive commitment to the Bond Challenge to restore 2 million hectares of land, degraded land, by 2030. And we know that the opportunity assessment for forest landscape restoration in Rwanda has revealed that forestry and agroforestry together can help restore 1.1 million hectares of land. And so what we're doing with Rwanda is looking at how our Regreening Africa app can help ensure the monitoring of trees from nurseries to harvest, using digital and citizen science tools for monitoring the forestry and agroforestry projects, and working with local partners and government. What we see is really that from nursery to tree planting to monitoring, we can look at wood harvesting, we can look at multiple crops that come from trees, whether it's oils, whether it's fruit. We know that at least 40% of fruits that we eat come from trees. And so what we see is really this capacity to work together with government and ensure that with extension service, we plan and monitor trees on farm through this work that we're scaling through the Regreening Africa app with the European Commission. And so we know that the power of data sets is how are we mobilizing them for benefits so data really turns into gold.
Thank you, Eliane, for the great insights and also for rallying more people to join us in developing AI by Africans. And speaking about the digital revolution that happened on the continent was mainly driven by mobile technologies. I'd like to ask now to turn to Stuart and elaborate a little bit on how we can merge AI and mobile technology and use it for agriculture.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot has already been said on the importance of investing in mobile connectivity, having fiber optic networks. There was a lot discussed this morning on that, and then building out the mobile coverage. I mean, a lot of you might be interested to know that even in the United States, in rural areas, there's a lot of disconnected farmers there as well. So it's just really difficult to cover the rural areas. But maybe a couple of things to think about. I'd love to hear the minister's take on this too. Is as we think about some of these gaps in coverage that we have today, and how do we cover those areas? A couple of things. One is some of these models are getting smaller. They can run on smaller devices. We've seen the NVIDIA computer that a few $1,000s and can run a DeepSeek model. So, I think that's something for us to track is, how small and efficient and good are these models going to get, because they could run on fairly affordable devices, and that would allow you, to connect in through a local Wi-Fi or other, techniques to that source of knowledge and information. Even down to a phone. I mean, we've seen some examples with computer vision models where they just run on the phone in a disconnected environment. And so you can still use the inference, so the model's been trained on huge amounts of data, but it's actually just deployed on a phone to be able to then identify a disease and then give a farmer a recommendation. So I think that's sort of a interesting thing to think about. The other might be, I don't know how controversial this is, but if you think about satellite internet, and no matter what you think of people that run those types of companies, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting that in disconnected environments you could have downlink equipment that could provide you high-speed internet. And so maybe it's a blending of these different technologies. We sort of rely on the mobile network operators. We maybe switch to other methods for localization of connectivity. Now, once you've solved that, then also has been mentioned around adoption and cost. And so I've seen some interesting programs. Here in Rwanda, I just was hearing about the programs to get a smartphone in every household, and negotiating with MNOs on subsidizing data access, subsidizing phones. We have a partner operating here called 1 Acre Fund that works with about 2 million farmers across Rwanda. And they have a program where they're providing a $7 phone the farmer still needs to pay for it, but they get credit for it, and they pay for it over the season. And so, if they're successful that season, then they're able to cover the cost of the phone. So looking at it just like any other input is maybe another way to address these, connectivity issues.
Thank you very much. The industry is moving very fast and seeing more devices that are affordable, models that are not requiring a lot of compute. But we still need some dollars to be spent, some investment to bring in. I'd like to turn to the next speaker, Charlene, and say, how are we going to finance AI in agriculture? Any ideas?
Yeah, happy to reflect on that a little bit. And a lot has been said about all the different things we need. It's not just the algorithms, it's also a whole bunch of the other technologies in the ecosystem as well. And what we see in financing in agriculture, not just with technology, but overall in the transformation of agriculture at the moment, and maybe to step back a little bit, the goal here is not to use AI to just do what we were doing a little more efficiently. The goal for us should be to use AI to accelerate the transformation of agriculture, because the way it is today is not going to just scale to what we need in the future for our food security needs and et cetera. So if you think about that transformation, yes, there's all these technology needs, et cetera, and you need money. But some of that investment is actually going down, right? So if you look at the share of the digital spend in climate, et cetera, right, on technologies, et cetera, agriculture in 2021-ish, 2020, 2021, had about a quarter of the share of the investments going in. That has declined now in 2024 to 8%. Right? So we're moving in the wrong direction in some ways in terms of the share of investment in that digital and tech space that's in climate investments and so on, that's going towards ag. And that's one piece of it. There's multiple types. Part of this is because we have a lot of fragmented solutions, many of which don't have a pathway to scale. And the pathway to scale comes from, of course, supporting these innovators, et cetera, to think about their pathway to scale. It's also about building the ecosystem around them so that these technologies can be adopted. So you come up with a great technology, but nobody has mobile phones, and it's not going to go anywhere, right? So that's part of it. The second part of that is we have insufficient investment into capacity building, people processes. So at BCG, we use a 10-20-70 rule. We use it across the private sector. Anything for digital transformation, AI transformation, we've kind of validated this over and over again, is the 10-20-70 rule. 10 is algorithms. 20% of the answer sits in tools and technologies. 70% of the answer of whether something will actually get adopted and will actually scale sits in people, capacity building, trust, and so on. And so what we need on the financing side is things that are scalable, that can be invested into. To drive to that scalability, we need to be able to start investing collectively into not just the technology, not just the tools, not just the algorithms, but helping farmers use that. Only 15 to 30% of the digital solutions in Africa that are out there that have meaningful usage have return usage, right? So farmers try it for a little while, drop out. So how do we build that scale is one part of the financing part. And the second part that we see as a challenge happening often, and it was great to hear this morning about the challenge that was put forward out of this summit to create a financing facility, is what we have is a whole bunch of fragmented investors. And so when you ask farmers, we've done surveys with farmers and kind of deep insight sessions with farmers around the world, including in Africa. And there's actually something quite common between the American farmer and the African farmer, and that's really people come to them many, many, many times with piecemeal solutions. And if we don't think about the farmer's P&L as a whole, and what is the stack of financing that they need to make their transition happen, throwing a lot of little things at them will continue to increase and exacerbate this problem of not being able to scale. A farmer, just a line of credit is not going to solve the problem. They need the stack of insurance, capital, grant, training, all of these pieces to come together into holistic programs if they're going to drive change. So it's these two paths in my mind. One is really how do we create the ecosystem and the support, including the investments into capacity building that drive towards scale and make things investable. And on the other hand, start to stack that investment so that it actually drives meaningful change.
Thank you very much. I think we are doing very well on the time, remaining with about 10 minutes, and I would like to use this time for any final thoughts. We're having great discussion today, and of course, expecting more tomorrow. When we leave here, what would you like to see in the next 6 months or a year, or even in the medium term? And I would like the Honorable Minister to kickstart with sharing his final thoughts.
Well, my final thoughts would be that as we leave here, as policymakers, as industry, as players in the space, we must all begin to ask ourselves what more we can do to put the value of AI in the hands of our farmers. What more can we do to make AI do for farming on the continent what mobile money did for financial inclusivity on the continent? Without the innovation of mobile money, millions of Africans will not have been connected financially on the digital platform. But it took innovation of private sector, it took regulatory reforms and frameworks to allow for innovation meet a critical need, digital inclusion. Can we do same for agriculture, where innovation is going to grow to deal with food insecurity and improve the economic livelihood of farmers? And as policymakers, we are adaptable in our legislation and regulatory frameworks to allow for agritech to become a big issue. That, for me, is where I think we need to go. In Ghana, we're looking at doing that by trying to take away all, that's why my ministry's name has changed. I was introduced as Minister for Communication and Digitalization. That used to be the old name of the ministry. Now it's called Communication, Digital Technology, and Innovation. Because for us, we believe that the entire digital tech ecosystem, be it fintech, agritech, health tech, edutech, insurtech, had all been left under the central bank, which was a very traditional institution and didn't have agility to support innovation sandboxes. We need to rethink the whole legislative framework, such that legislation does not stifle innovation, and innovation is not driven by just profit, but by seeing a change in our agricultural sector. That will be the dream.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. And to Stuart, any final thoughts? And we have all 1 minute, maximum 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm watching the clock. Yeah, I mean, I guess if I reflect on, I started my career here in East Africa, straight out of school, working in research, crop simulation modeling and climate modeling, and I've seen the ag tech sector change over those years. I mean, it's gone from a few handful of ag tech innovators, it's over 600 now. There's been $1.5 billion invested by impact investors and others into these ag tech innovations. But when I reflect on sort of the impact of that, it's been, maybe not lived up to the ambition that we had. There's, on average, less than 10% active use of these services across sub-Saharan African countries. And so how do we learn from that when it comes to AI? And I think a lot of the things you just mentioned, Honourable Minister, about policy, data infrastructure, making sure data is available to innovators. Put these tools in the hands of youth. I mean, it's an incredible amount of creativity that can happen, but there's just no way that me sitting in Seattle is going to understand what a female potato farmer in Rwanda really needs, like what the real problem is. And so if you can put these tools in the hands of local innovators through sandboxes and other mechanisms, then I think you'll start to sort of realize the vision of what AI can achieve. So that's sort of what I'm excited about in the AI space.
Thank you. Mr. Pate?
Yeah, no, we look at it more from a system perspective. So we are talking about agriculture, but we have a Minister of Technology and Innovation here, but we don't have a Minister of Agriculture. But beyond the Minister of, and we are representing those ones. So it's just to say we need to mainstream it into other sectors. Yeah. And that's why it's very important. It could be also in the nutrition and so on. So to me, from a government perspective, there should be also KPIs of each ministries saying that this is what I'm doing on AI to make sure that when you aggregate all, this government has reached like 25% or 50%, because at the end of the day, things are going very fast. So from a policy perspective, it should be metrics from a government decision. And if you have an allocation, it's not just money put at the Ministry of Innovation and Technology to do AI, but it's also the money that is going somewhere. The second one and last is on youth. Today, I think when we look at it's a business. You have data, you make business. In the past, you used to hold it, you have power, but it's not anymore the case. Sharing data is power to me. So I think should start thinking that way, because when you look at it from a system and ecosystems and regions, if you don't share, you're also in a problem. And that's exactly what Honorable Minister was saying when it comes to forecasting, even disease that may happen in and cocoa is from Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. All of this is being shared. But to change this, the youth and the innovation, you need to bring them. Many are looking for jobs, from production to agriculture to input to processing to trade to digital services. When this is well understood that there is money, it's a business, it's science, then I think we should be able also to get more jobs for young people into this, but that has also a lot of work to be done in communication to bring young people into this sphere.
Thank you. Shalini?
Some really fantastic points, so I won't repeat them, but I do want to emphasize one of the pieces, which is really around the opportunity for this to be a revolution in agriculture, not just about taking what we have and making it more efficient, but the opportunity, and so it's not re-engineering, it's the opportunity to reimagine what we do with agriculture. And that if we often cite this data, it's, who knows if it's exactly right or not, the average age of an African farmer is 60 years. How are we bringing the youth into farming? How are we bringing the youth all along the value chain? And technology and AI can be a really powerful way to re-energize and reinvigorate agriculture. And I'll go back to the point that I was making earlier. There are some great farmer-facing things to do, but like you said, there are great opportunities for economic value creation all along that value chain, including in how government makes decisions, and so on. So we can take AI and really reimagine the entire value chain and really re-energize it with youth, and that's the opportunity here.
Thank you very much, and we'll end up by Eliane.
Yes. So I just want to think about the centuries of agriculture production where there was extraction of resources from the continent flowing everywhere to produce value elsewhere. We know that today, even the cocoa chocolate industry, only 4% of the value stays in Africa. So we have the opportunity from going from a resource-intensive, depleting framework to a knowledge-intensive, sustainable, prosperity-building framework. And this is what AI can do for the continent. And we can do that only if we are able to figure out how do we finance bringing knowledge to agriculture instead of chemical inputs? And so that's a paradigm shift that Parmesh Shah and I, who's in the audience, have talked a lot about. And so how we finance the transformation of agricultural systems is key to how we're going to harness AI and bring in the needed finance to really build African circular bioeconomies that feed the people locally, that ensure that we build prosperous economies, and farmers aren't farming themselves poor, but farming themselves into prosperity that allows them to take care of their families so they can have an education and either continue in farming or go into other spaces, but really have that 23% GDP. If you think 60% of our population is working to produce 23%, that 60% should produce 60% at least. And if we think of the cocoa industry where only 4% is going to the continent, that means if we just tripled that, we could get to a value where we know that the inputs from our farmers, from agriculture, are corresponding to the actual value we need to have for our agriculture to build prosperous African economies that build on our natural capital and bring it back and grow it, while also ensuring that we are phenomenal trade partners for the world.
Thank you very much for the great insight from all the panelists. Key takeaway: AI should replicate the success of mobile money. Legislation should not stifle innovation. Empowering the youth, having more sandboxes, mainstreaming AI in the ministries and institutions involved in the agriculture sector. We have an opportunity for revolution, not evolution, and moving from resource intensive toward more knowledge intensive and getting more productivity. And I'll add my own. Agriculture is the business for everyone. Without food, we don't get anything else. With that, I want to thank you all for your kind attention and thank all the panelists. We are going to stay for a group photo.